The first time I saw the fluorescent pink tow truck backing up to my delivery van, I knew someone had made a catastrophic mistake. I had been driving propane delivery trucks for 15 years across suburban Georgia, and never once had anyone been stupid enough to tow a commercial vehicle mid-delivery, especially one clearly marked with hazardous materials placards and actively servicing a customer. My name is Jake Reynolds, and I own Reynolds Propane Services, a company my father started back in 1987. We service about 40% of Peachtree Shores, an upscale planned community outside Atlanta, where about 3,000 homes rely exclusively on propane for heating, hot water, and cooking. Natural gas lines never made it out this far when the development was built in the early 2000s, so every single house has a propane tank, and every single one of those tanks needs regular refilling. That is where I come in, or at least where I used to come in. It was a Tuesday morning in late January, cold enough that my breath came out in visible puffs as I worked. I had just connected my delivery hose to the Henderson's 500-gallon tank and started the fill when I heard footsteps crunching across the frost-covered lawn behind me. I turned to see a woman in her late 40s marching toward me, with the kind of determined stride that immediately sets off alarm bells. She wore expensive athleisure wear, the kind that costs $300 but has never seen the inside of an actual gym, and her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. "Excuse me," she called out in that particular tone that certain women use when they are absolutely not excusing anything. "You cannot park that monstrosity there." I looked at my van, which was parked exactly where it always parked, in the Henderson's driveway, doing exactly what it was supposed to be doing. The delivery hose stretched from the truck to their propane tank, and I could hear the familiar whoosh of liquid propane flowing through the line. "Madam, I am in the middle of a delivery," I said, keeping my voice level and professional. "I will be done in about 20 minutes. "I do not care what you are doing," she said, and I noticed she was holding a laminated badge that read HOA Board President in Comic Sans font. "Your vehicle is in violation of Peachtree Shores Community Standards, Section 7, Paragraph 3, which clearly states that commercial vehicles may not be parked in residential driveways between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process what she had just said. "This is not parking. This is an active service delivery. I am literally pumping propane into this house right now." Her eyes narrowed. "The rules do not make exceptions for service vehicles. If you do not move this truck immediately, I will have it towed." "Lady, you cannot tow a hazmat vehicle that is actively transferring flammable gas. That is not just against HOA rules, that is against federal DOT regulations. If you interrupt this delivery, you could cause a serious safety hazard." She pulled out her phone with a triumphant expression that made my stomach sink. "We will see about that. I have the towing company on speed dial." "Wait," I said, holding up my hand. "Just wait. Let me finish this delivery. It will take 20 minutes and then I will be gone. You will never have to see my truck in a driveway during your precious HOA hours again, because I will schedule all my deliveries before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Problem solved." "The rules are the rules," she said, already dialing. "If I make an exception for you, then everyone will want exceptions." "My name is Brenda Morrison, and I have been president of this HOA for 6 years because I do not bend the rules for anyone." I wanted to explain to Brenda Morrison that this was not about bending rules. This was about basic common sense and safety regulations that superseded her HOA nonsense. But she was already talking on the phone, and 5 minutes later that pink tow truck rolled up. The driver was a young guy, maybe 25, who took one look at my propane truck and immediately shook his head. "Lady, I cannot tow that. It has hazmat placards." "Your contract with Peachtree Shores HOA requires you to tow any vehicle we identify as in violation," Brenda said, pulling out another laminated card, this one apparently containing the towing contract terms. "Yeah, but there are laws," the driver said. "Federal laws. I could lose my license." Brenda's face was turning red now, and her voice rose to a pitch that probably disturbed dogs 3 blocks away. "If you do not tow this truck right now, I will make sure your company never works in Peachtree Shores again. We have over 3,000 homes here, and we are your biggest client." The driver looked at me, then at Brenda, then at his tow truck. I could see him doing the mental math, weighing his boss's reaction to losing a major contract against the risk of violating federal regulations. Greed and fear of unemployment won. "All right," he said reluctantly. "But I am documenting that you ordered me to do this over my objections." "I do not care what you document," Brenda snapped. "Just do your job." "Hold on," I said, moving toward my truck. "I need to shut off the transfer first." "You cannot just drag the truck away while it is actively pumping propane." I shut down the pump, closed the valves, and disconnected the hose, moving as quickly as safety allowed. The Hendersons' tank was only about 60% full, meaning they would run out of propane in about 2 weeks instead of the usual 6. Mrs. Henderson was going to be confused when she got my bill for a partial delivery, but at least I had prevented an actual disaster. The tow truck driver hooked up my van and hauled it away, and Brenda stood there with her arms crossed, looking satisfied with herself in a way that made me want to scream. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called my dispatcher. "Hey, Marie, I need you to pull up all our scheduled deliveries for Peachtree Shores." "Sure thing, boss. What am I looking for?" "Cancel all of them." There was a long pause. "All of them. Jake, we service like 1,200 homes in that development." "I know exactly how many homes we service there, and I want every single delivery canceled effective immediately. Put a block on the entire zip code. No one from Reynolds Propane is setting foot in Peachtree Shores until further notice." Marie knew me well enough not to argue when I used that tone. "You got it. What should I tell customers when they call asking why their deliveries got canceled?" "Tell them to contact their HOA president, Brenda Morrison. Tell them she is the reason they are not getting propane anymore." I hung up and looked at Brenda, who was still standing there with that smug expression. "You just made the biggest mistake of your HOA career." "Are you threatening me?" she asked, pulling out her phone again like she was ready to call the police. "No threat, just a fact. I am the primary propane supplier for this development. About 40% of your homes use my service, and I just canceled every single one of them. Good luck keeping your neighbors happy when they start running out of heat and hot water in the middle of winter." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "You cannot do that. You have contracts. Residential propane delivery contracts are month to month and can be terminated by either party with 0 notice for safety reasons. Your HOA just created an unsafe working environment by towing my vehicle during an active hazmat transfer. That is grounds for immediate termination of service. Enjoy explaining to your neighbors why they are going to be taking cold showers." I called an Uber to take me back to my company's main office, leaving Brenda standing in the Hendersons' driveway. During the 20-minute ride, my phone started ringing. First it was Mrs. Henderson, confused about why her delivery got cut short. Then it was the Clarks, wondering why their scheduled Thursday delivery just got canceled. Then it was the Patels, the Johnsons, and about 15 other customers, all asking variations of the same question. I gave them all the same answer. I am sorry, but Reynolds Propane can no longer service addresses in Peachtree Shores due to safety concerns with the HOA management. I recommend contacting Brenda Morrison to resolve the issue or finding another propane supplier. The problem, which I knew but most residents did not, was that there were only 3 propane companies servicing the greater Atlanta area. Reynolds Propane was the biggest and had the best prices because of our volume and efficiency. The other 2 companies, Suburban Gas Solutions and Metro Propane Inc., both charged about 30% more and had longer wait times for deliveries because they were smaller operations. By the time I got back to my office, my phone had 73 missed calls. Marie looked up from her desk with wide eyes. "Jake, the phones have not stopped ringing. What happened out there?" I explained the situation while she listened with increasing disbelief. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. "That HOA lady towed your truck during a delivery. Is she insane?" "Apparently. How many cancellation calls have we processed?" "All of them. 1,247 Peachtree Shores customers, all flagged as terminated for safety reasons. I have also been getting calls from Peachtree Shores residents who are not our customers, asking if we can take them on, and I have been telling them we cannot service that area anymore." "Good. What about the other propane companies?" Marie pulled up something on her computer. "I have a friend who works dispatch at Suburban Gas Solutions. She says they are getting slammed with calls from Peachtree Shores residents trying to switch providers. But here is the thing, they only have 6 delivery trucks and they are already running at near capacity. They told most callers it would be at least 3 weeks before they could schedule a first delivery, and they are charging a $200 new customer hookup fee plus their regular delivery rates." And Metro Propane, similar story. 4 trucks, fully booked, looking at a month out for new customers. I did the math in my head. Most of my Peachtree Shores customers were on regular delivery schedules, which meant their tanks were generally between 20 and 40% full when we topped them off. Depending on usage, most homes would run completely dry within 2 to 4 weeks. And it was January, meaning they were using propane constantly for heating. "This is going to get ugly," I said. I had no idea how right I was. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone had logged over 300 calls from Peachtree Shores residents. Most were confused and frustrated, wanting to know why their propane service had suddenly been terminated. A few were angry, accusing me of abandoning them. But an increasing number were panicked, especially the ones who checked their tank gauges and realized they only had a week or 2 of propane left. I felt bad for these people. None of this was their fault. They were just homeowners who wanted heat and hot water, and they were caught in the middle of a fight between me and their HOA president. But I had meant what I said to Brenda. I was not sending my drivers into a community where the HOA thought it was acceptable to tow active service vehicles. That was not just disrespectful, it was dangerous. On Thursday morning, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Reynolds Propane, this is Jake." "Mr. Reynolds, my name is Patricia Chen, and I am on the board of directors for Peachtree Shores HOA. Her voice was strained, diplomatic. "I am calling about the situation with Brenda Morrison and your delivery van." "You mean the situation where your president illegally towed my commercial vehicle during an active hazmat delivery?" "Yes, that situation." "Mr. Reynolds, I want you to know that several board members, myself included, were not aware of the incident until yesterday when we started getting calls from residents. We have reviewed the HOA bylaws and the circumstances, and we believe Brenda acted inappropriately." "That is an understatement." "I agree. We are calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow evening to address this issue. Would you be willing to attend and discuss what it would take to resume service to our community? I leaned back in my chair, considering. Part of me wanted to tell Patricia Chen exactly what she could do with her emergency board meeting. But the better part of me, the part that remembered all my customers who had nothing to do with Brenda's power trip, made me pause. I will attend on 2 conditions. 1. Brenda Morrison issues a formal written apology acknowledging that she violated federal DOT regulations and created a safety hazard. 2. The HOA board formally prohibits her from interfering with propane deliveries going forward and puts that prohibition in writing. I think we can work with that. The meeting is at 7 p.m. tomorrow at the community center. I will email you the address. I will be there. The Peachtree Shores Community Center was one of those overly fancy clubhouses that HOAs in upscale developments love to build. It had a pool, a fitness center, a full kitchen, and a meeting room that could seat about 100 people. When I arrived at 6:55 p.m. on Friday, that meeting room was packed with at least 200 angry residents, with more standing in the hallway outside. I recognized a lot of faces from my years of service calls. The Hendersons were there, looking stressed. The Clarks, the Patels, the Johnsons, all my regulars, plus dozens of others I had never met. The mood in the room was tense and hostile, and not toward me. Patricia Chen met me at the door. She was a slim woman in her 50s with graying hair and tired eyes. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Reynolds. Fair warning, it has been a rough few days." "I can imagine." She led me to a table at the front of the room where 5 other board members sat. Brenda Morrison was at the center, and she looked like she had aged 5 years in the past 3 days. Her face was tight and pale, and she refused to make eye contact with anyone. Patricia called the meeting to order, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is an unusual emergency meeting, but we are dealing with an unusual emergency situation. As most of you know by now, our primary propane supplier, Reynolds Propane Services, has terminated service to all Peachtree Shores customers. This happened because of an incident on Tuesday involving HOA President Brenda Morrison and Mr. Jake Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds is here tonight to discuss the situation, and we hope to reach a resolution. Mr. Reynolds, would you like to explain what happened?" I stood up and gave the room a straightforward account of Tuesday morning. How I was in the middle of an active delivery when Brenda ordered my truck towed. How I explained the safety issues and federal regulations. How she ignored all of that and had my vehicle towed anyway. And how I immediately canceled service to the entire development, because I could not guarantee my driver's safety or the safety of residents if the HOA was going to interfere with hazmat operations. By the time I finished, the room had gone from tense to furious, and all that fury was pointed at Brenda. People were shouting questions and accusations, and Patricia had to bang a gavel to restore order. "Everyone, please, one at a time." "Yes, Michael," a man in his 60s stood up, red-faced. "Brenda, what the hell were you thinking? You cannot tow a propane truck. That is insane." "I was enforcing the rules," Brenda said, her voice defensive and shrill. "The rules that this community voted on and approved. If I let one person break them, then everyone will think they can break them." "It is not breaking the rules to deliver propane," someone else shouted. "That is a utility service. The rules do not say that," Brenda shot back. "They say no commercial vehicles in driveways during daytime hours, period." "Then the rules are stupid," a woman yelled from the back. The room erupted again, and this time it took Patricia several minutes to calm everyone down. While she was doing that, I caught the eye of the man who had spoken first, Michael. He looked at me and mouthed the words, "I am so sorry." Patricia finally got control again. "Brenda, I think it is clear that the board and the community believe you made an error in judgment. We need to fix this situation before people start running out of propane. Some residents are already down to less than 10% in their tanks. So what do you want me to do?" Brenda asked, and I could hear the resentment in her voice. "Mr. Reynolds has made his requirements clear. A written apology acknowledging the safety violation and a formal prohibition against HOA interference with propane deliveries." "I am not apologizing," Brenda said flatly. "I did nothing wrong. I enforced the rules as written." The room went dead silent. Even Patricia looked shocked. "Brenda," Patricia said carefully, "if you do not apologize, we have over 200 families who are going to run out of propane. They will have no heat, no hot water, no way to cook. In the middle of winter. Then maybe they should have thought about that before buying houses in a community with strict HOA rules," Brenda said. I watched in amazement as this woman chose her ego over the welfare of her entire community. The room exploded in anger, with multiple people shouting at once. Someone called for Brenda to be removed from the board. Someone else called her an obscene name. Patricia was banging her gavel so hard I thought it might break. Finally, a large man in his 40s pushed his way to the front. "I am making a formal motion to remove Brenda Morrison as HOA president and from the board of directors, effective immediately, for gross negligence and failure to act in the community's best interests." "I second that motion," at least 5 people called out simultaneously. Patricia looked at the other board members. All in favor, 5 hands went up instantly. Only Brenda stayed down. The motion passes. "Brenda, you are removed from the board. Please leave." Brenda stood up, her face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You cannot do this to me. I will sue. I will sue all of you." "The HOA bylaws are clear," Patricia said, her voice steady. "A board member can be removed by a majority vote of the board for cause. We have cause. Please leave before we call security." Brenda gathered her things and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room breathed a collective sigh of relief. Patricia turned to me. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of the Peachtree Shores HOA Board of Directors, I formally and sincerely apologize for the actions of our former president. She violated federal safety regulations, endangered the community, and created this crisis through her poor judgment. We acknowledge that she was completely in the wrong, and we are prepared to put in writing that no HOA board member or representative will ever interfere with propane delivery operations again. Will that be sufficient for you to resume service?" I had not expected it to be this easy. I had expected to have to argue and negotiate, but Patricia and the board had just done exactly what I asked for and more. "Yes," I said, "that will be sufficient. Once I have that written apology and the policy change in writing, I will resume service immediately. However, I need everyone here to understand that it is going to take time to get everyone back on the delivery schedule. We have 1,200 customers to reschedule, and some of you are going to run critically low before we can get to you. I will prioritize based on tank levels, with the emptiest tanks getting serviced first." "That is more than fair," Patricia said. "Can we get you that documentation tonight?" "Tonight would be great." It took about 2 hours for the HOA's lawyer, who had been called in for the emergency meeting, to draft up the formal apology and policy change. While we waited, I talked to dozens of residents, taking down their addresses and estimated tank levels. Mrs. Henderson gave me a hug. Mr. Clark shook my hand and thanked me for standing up to Brenda. The Patels offered to bring me dinner from their restaurant. By 10 p.m., I had signed documents in hand and a list of 47 homes that were critically low on propane. I called Marie from the parking lot. "Hey boss, how did it go? We are back in business. I need you to call in the weekend crew. We are running emergency deliveries starting tomorrow morning for customers who are below 15%. I am emailing you the priority list now. You got it, Jake? Yeah, I am proud of you. You could have left those people hanging, but you did not. It was not their fault. Their HOA president was insane." The next morning, I personally drove the first delivery truck out to Peachtree Shores. My first stop was the Hendersons, whose tank was down to 12%. Mrs. Henderson cried when she saw me pull up. Over the next week, my crew worked overtime to get all our former Peachtree Shores customers back on schedule. Some had already signed up with other companies during the crisis, which was fine, but most were happy to return to Reynolds Propane. We actually picked up about 100 new customers from the incident, people who had been using other services but appreciated how I had stood my ground on safety and principles. The story of Brenda and the towed propane truck spread beyond Peachtree Shores. I got calls from several other HOA-managed communities in the area, wanting to make sure their policies did not have similar issues. A local news station ran a story about it, which led to a state legislator introducing a bill to explicitly exempt utility service vehicles from HOA parking restrictions. The bill passed 3 months later. As for Brenda Morrison, I heard through the community grapevine that she had tried to sue the HOA for wrongful removal, but her lawyer had taken one look at the bylaws and the circumstances and advised her she had no case. She ended up selling her house and moving to another development across town. I occasionally wondered if she had learned anything from the experience, but I doubted it. People like Brenda rarely do. One interesting thing happened about 2 months after the incident. I was making a routine delivery to the Clarks when Mr. Clark came out to chat, which he often did. "Hey Jake, did you hear about Brenda?" "No, what about her?" Turns out she was not just crazy about the HOA rules. After she got removed from the board, Patricia and the other directors did an audit of the HOA finances. Brenda had been president for 6 years, and she pretty much ran everything herself. Nobody else really looked at the books. I did not like where this was going. And they found about $80,000 missing. Brenda had been writing checks to fake vendors and pocketing the money. The HOA pressed charges and she got arrested last week. Holy shit. Yeah. She is looking at embezzlement charges, fraud, the whole deal. Turns out being a control freak about parking rules was just the tip of the iceberg. She was on a power trip because she was literally stealing from everyone and did not want anyone looking too closely at what she was doing. That put the whole incident in a new light. Brenda had not just been a petty tyrant enforcing stupid rules. She had been a criminal using those rules to maintain control and deflect attention from her embezzlement. By standing up to her over my towed truck, I had inadvertently started the chain of events that led to her being caught. "Is the HOA going to get the money back?" I asked. "Some of it, maybe." She spent a lot of it, apparently. Vacations, designer clothes, fancy dinners. But the insurance might cover some of the loss, and they are going after her assets. It is a mess. I finished the delivery and drove to my next stop, thinking about how a stupid fight over parking a propane truck in a driveway had ultimately exposed a much bigger crime. The world works in strange ways sometimes. About 6 months after the original incident, I got a call from Patricia Chen. The HOA was having their annual summer barbecue, and they wanted to invite me as a guest of honor to thank me for my years of service and for how I had handled the Brenda situation. I was not much for public recognition, but I said yes, because I genuinely liked most of the Peachtree Shores residents. The barbecue was at the community center, and it felt like half the development showed up. There were kids running around, people playing volleyball, music playing, the smell of grilled burgers and hot dogs in the air. Patricia gave a short speech thanking me, and people applauded, which was nice but also a little embarrassing. Afterward, I was standing by the pool talking to Mrs. Henderson when a man I did not recognize approached. He was in his 30s, athletic build with a friendly smile. Mr. Reynolds. I am David Martinez. I just moved into Peachtree Shores last month. Nice to meet you. You can call me Jake. Thanks. I wanted to introduce myself because I keep hearing this legendary story about you and the HOA president and the towed propane truck. Everyone I meet tells me about it. It is like the defining moment in this community's history. I laughed. I do not know about legendary, but it was definitely memorable. The thing is, David continued, I am an attorney and I specialize in HOA law. When I heard the details of what happened, I was shocked that you did not sue. You would have had a slam dunk case. Interference with commercial operations, violation of federal DOT regulations, emotional distress, loss of business. You could have taken the HOA for a significant amount of money. I know, I said. My own lawyer told me the same thing. But these people, I gestured around at the families enjoying their barbecue, they did not do anything wrong. If I had sued the HOA, I would have been suing them. Their HOA dues would have gone up to cover the settlement. It would not have hurt Brenda. It would have hurt the innocent people who were already victims of her nonsense. David looked at me with something like respect. That is a pretty principled stance. Maybe. Or maybe I just did not want the hassle of a lawsuit. Either way, it worked out fine. Well, for what it is worth, everyone here seems to think you are a hero. I spent another hour at the barbecue, chatting with customers old and new, eating a pretty good burger and watching the sunset over the community pool. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the whole crazy experience. In the end, Brenda Morrison's power trip had backfired spectacularly. She had lost her position, her reputation, and her freedom. The HOA had recovered from the crisis and was now running more transparently under Patricia's leadership. The community had learned the importance of paying attention to what their HOA board was doing, and I had gained new customers and a reputation for standing up for what was right. There was also the matter of the legal fallout from Brenda's arrest. About a month after the barbecue, I got a subpoena to testify at her trial. The prosecution was building a case that showed a pattern of abuse of power, and my incident with the towed truck was part of that pattern. The trial was held at the Fulton County Courthouse, and it was a bigger deal than I had expected. Besides the embezzlement charges, Brenda was also facing charges related to several other incidents where she had abused her HOA authority. Apparently, after my story went public, other people came forward with their own tales of Brenda's tyranny. There was the family she had fined $5,000 for planting the wrong shade of rose bushes. The couple she had tried to foreclose on because their mailbox was 3 inches too tall. The elderly man she had harassed for weeks because he parked his RV in his own driveway for 2 days. The list went on and on. When it was my turn to testify, the prosecutor asked me to describe what had happened that Tuesday morning in January. I told the story again, and I could see several jury members shaking their heads in disbelief when I got to the part about Brenda ordering the tow truck driver to ignore federal regulations. And what was your business loss as a result of Mrs. Morrison's actions? The prosecutor asked. Well, I had to cancel 1,200 accounts temporarily, which cost me about $15,000 in lost revenue for the time they were canceled. Plus, I paid about $3,000 to get my truck out of impound and repair some damage the tow truck did to the hitch. and probably another $2,000 in administrative costs dealing with all the cancellations and reschedules. So about $20,000 in total, roughly, yes. And did you sue the HOA or Mrs. Morrison for these losses? No, I did not. Why not? Because I did not think it was right to make the homeowners pay for their president's bad decisions. And honestly, once the board removed her and apologized, that was good enough for me. I could see the prosecutor appreciated that answer. It made me look reasonable, and Brenda look even worse by comparison. Brenda's defense attorney tried to cross-examine me, suggesting that I had overreacted by canceling service to the entire community. But that line of questioning did not go well for him, because I was able to explain in detail exactly why it was a safety issue, and why I could not risk having my drivers towed during future deliveries. The trial lasted 3 days, and the jury deliberated for about 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts: embezzlement, fraud, and several charges related to abuse of authority. The judge sentenced Brenda to 6 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus additional fines. After the sentencing, Patricia Chen, who had also testified at the trial, found me in the courthouse hallway. "Thank you for testifying, Jake. I know it took time out of your business. No problem. I am just glad justice got served. You know, in a weird way, you saved this community. If you had not stood up to Brenda, if you had just moved your truck and let her keep bullying people, we might never have looked closely enough to discover what she was doing with our money. I did not do it to be a hero. I did it because she was wrong and someone needed to tell her that. Still, the community owes you. If you ever need anything, you let us know." I thanked her and headed back to my office, ready to put the whole Brenda Morrison saga behind me once and for all. Life went back to normal after that. I continued servicing my Peachtree Shores customers in dozens of other communities around Metro Atlanta. My business actually grew significantly in the year following the incident, partly because of the positive publicity and partly because other HOAs started explicitly writing exemptions for utility vehicles into their rules, which made my job easier everywhere. I hired 3 more drivers and bought 2 more trucks to handle the increased demand. Marie got a promotion to operations manager. My father, who had retired 5 years earlier, called me to say he was proud of how I had handled the situation and that I was running the company better than he ever did. The Peachtree Shores HOA thrived under new leadership. Patricia served as president for 2 years before passing the torch to Michael, the man who had made the motion to remove Brenda. The community implemented new oversight procedures for board members, including mandatory financial audits and term limits. Several other HOAs in the area adopted similar reforms after hearing about what had happened. As for the broader impact, that state law exempting utility vehicles from HOA restrictions passed unanimously and was signed by the governor. It was officially called the Utility Service Protection Act, but everyone in the propane industry called it the Brenda Morrison Law. I got a kick out of that. One of the more interesting long-term consequences happened about 18 months after the original incident. I was having lunch at a diner near my office when a woman in her 30s approached my table. "Excuse me, are you Jake Reynolds, the propane guy?" "That is me. I am Jennifer Walsh. I am a reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I am working on a story about HOA abuse and how it affects small businesses and homeowners. Your case came up in my research, and I would love to interview you if you have time." I agreed to the interview, and we met at my office the following week. Jennifer spent 2 hours asking me detailed questions about the incident with Brenda, about HOA regulations in general, and about how communities could balance the need for standards with the need for common sense. The article ran a month later as a full-page feature in the Sunday paper. It told my story alongside several others about HOA overreach and abuse. The response was enormous. The paper received hundreds of letters and emails from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. The story was picked up by national news outlets. Suddenly, I was doing phone interviews with journalists from around the country, all wanting to talk about HOAs and power-tripping board presidents. Out of all that attention came something unexpectedly positive. A group of state legislators formed a committee to study HOA regulations and recommend reforms. They invited me to testify, along with dozens of other small business owners and homeowners who had been affected by unreasonable HOA rules. I drove to the state capitol on a rainy morning in March and found myself in a hearing room with about 50 other people, all waiting to tell their stories. Some were heartbreaking, like the elderly woman who had been fined into bankruptcy over a paint color. Some were infuriating, like the veteran who had been banned from flying an American flag. And some, like mine, were just absurd examples of HOA power run amok. The committee listened to testimony for 3 days, and over the following months, they drafted a comprehensive HOA reform bill. It included provisions for explicit exemptions for utility and emergency service vehicles from parking restrictions, mandatory financial oversight and regular audits for HOA boards, term limits for board presidents and other officers, a formal appeals process for homeowners facing fines or other sanctions, criminal penalties for board members who abused their authority or misused HOA funds, protection for homeowners who installed solar panels, drought-resistant landscaping, and other environmentally friendly improvements. The bill passed with strong bipartisan support and was signed into law. Georgia became a model for other states looking to rein in HOA abuses. Several other states passed similar legislation over the next few years. I never expected that refusing to let an HOA president tow my truck would lead to statewide legal reform, but life is strange that way. Sometimes standing up for what is right, even in a small way, can have ripples that spread far beyond what you imagine. 3 years after the incident, I was invited back to Peachtree Shores for another community event, this one marking the development's 20th anniversary. The place had changed in subtle ways. There were more solar panels on roofs, more diverse landscaping, more RVs and boats parked in driveways without anyone freaking out about it. The community felt more relaxed, more like a neighborhood, and less like a dictatorship. I ran into Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, who were now in their 70s and had grandkids running around. We talked about the old days, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned that she sometimes still could not believe what had happened with Brenda. "You know what the craziest part is," she said. "We all voted for her. 6 years in a row, we kept electing her because we thought she was keeping the community nice. We did not realize that nice is not the same as livable." That resonated with me. Brenda had not started out as a villain. She had probably started out genuinely wanting to maintain property values and community standards. But somewhere along the way, the power had gone to her head, and she had lost sight of the fact that rules are supposed to serve people, not the other way around. By the time she was embezzling money and towing propane trucks, she had become the kind of petty tyrant that makes everyone miserable. The anniversary party wound down as the sun set, and I found myself standing with Patricia, Michael, and a few other community leaders, watching kids play on the lawn. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had just moved your truck that day?" Michael asked me. "Sometimes. Brenda probably would have kept on stealing. The community would have kept suffering under her rules. And eventually, something else would have broken, maybe something worse. So, in a way, her towing your truck was the best thing that could have happened to us," Patricia said. "I would not go that far, but I do think sometimes bad situations have a way of forcing necessary changes. You all could have just found a new propane supplier and ignored the bigger issues. Instead, you dealt with them head-on. Because you gave us no choice," Michael said with a grin. "You canceled everyone's service and forced us to confront what Brenda was doing. I canceled service because I was not going to put my drivers at risk. But yeah, I guess it worked out." We stood there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the community Brenda had tried so hard to control enjoy their freedom from her tyranny. It was a good feeling. As I drove home that evening, I thought about all the ways that one Tuesday morning in January had changed things. A community had reformed itself. Laws had been changed. Awareness had been raised about the dangers of unchecked HOA power, and one corrupt official had faced justice for her crimes. But the thing I was most proud of was simpler than all of that. I had stood up for what was right when it would have been easier to back down. I had protected my employees from being put in dangerous situations. And I had shown a community that they did not have to accept abuse from people in authority. My father used to tell me that the propane business was not really about propane. It was about service, about relationships, about being there for people when they needed you. He said that if you took care of your customers and did right by them, the business would take care of itself. He was right about that, just like he was right about most things. The incident with Brenda Morrison had cost me money in the short term, but it had earned me trust and respect that was worth far more than any temporary loss of revenue. My business had grown. My reputation had grown. And most importantly, I could look at myself in the mirror every morning and know that I had not compromised my principles for convenience. As I pulled into my driveway that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Marie. It was a photo of the delivery schedule for the next day, completely full as usual, with a note. "Another day, another dollar. Thanks for building something worth working for, boss." I smiled and sent back a thumbs up. Tomorrow I would wake up early, check the trucks, review the routes, and head out to deliver propane to people who needed it. Some of those people would be in Peachtree Shores, where I would pull into driveways in broad daylight without worrying about being towed. Some would be in other communities, where reasonable people made reasonable decisions about utility services. And if I ever ran into another Brenda Morrison, another petty tyrant drunk on HOA power, I knew exactly what I would do. I would stand my ground, explain the rules and safety regulations, and if necessary, walk away until they learn to act like reasonable adults. Because at the end of the day, no community's property values are worth compromising safety, and no HOA president's ego is worth tolerating abuse. Those were the lessons of that cold Tuesday morning in January, and they were lessons I would carry with me for the rest of my career. The propane business is built on trust, on relationships, on showing up when people need you. But it is also built on respect, and respect has to go both ways. Brenda Morrison forgot that, and it cost her everything. The people of Peachtree Shores remembered it, and they built something better. That is the story of how an HOA towed my propane delivery van, how I stopped service and their entire development went dark, and how that one incident rippled out to change laws, reform communities, and remind people that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. and I would do it all again in a heartbeat.